Look, we both know why you clicked. Andy Undead is one of the newest, freshest, and most overpowered anime characters on the block, with a whole series built around the fact that he's too cracked to get unalived by anything. But can he beat Goku though? Yes. It's a question asked since the dawn of time. As early as anime characters could throw punches, the granddaddy of shonen manga was here to put everyone else back in their place, as anime's universal measuring stick. So I'm not gonna beat around the bush. In this video, I'll tell you exactly who can put the Undead Negator 6 feet under for good, explain if Goku is one of those characters, and maybe even touch on what tricks Andy could possibly have to pull out a W here. And if you'll stay with me to the end, we have a massive announcement to share about the immediate future of this channel that you guys are gonna love. Timestamps are still down below though, in case you'd like to skip around, and this is Andy versus Goku. Or maybe, more accurately, Could Goku Unalive Andy? Now, for all you diligently prepared Goku fans, myself perhaps included, waiting in the wings of this video to drop every kind of comment about our fiction soloing shonen king and his unbeatable power level, I think for all those unaware especially, we should probably discuss Andy's abilities first, since he's fresh off the anime press and uniquely equipped to handle any sort of these cross-verse matchups due to the power system of his world, negator abilities. Because within the series of Undead Unluck, negators are people granted the ability to negate certain rules or fundamental laws of the universe that have been enforced since the dawn of time by a malevolent god named Sun. These powers always seem to result in an unknown tragedy of some kind, ruining the lives, desires, or reality of the person who gained them, with each focusing exclusively on one fundamental concept to completely and utterly reject it, described by adding the word un before it. So for example, this girl Fuko has unluck, making her the universal opposite of luck, to the point that anyone who touches her is cursed with a tragic fate. And this guy here is Fang. He has unfade, rendering him the universal rejection of aging. In Andy's case, the power he was cursed with, Undead, basically turns him into a walking Uno reverse card for damage, specifically undoing anything that brings Andy closer to death, from aging to disease and even raw damage, which in effect gives him a complete immortality with a side of solid regen. And if that sounds kind of broken and undefined, that's because it is, since negator abilities are built to evolve and develop based upon the individual user's interpretation of how said powers work, which, while a bit weird to explain, basically works like this. If Andy was to believe something will directly or indirectly cause him death, then he can undo it. But if Andy were to experience any kind of damage or ailment that he doesn't believe could actually cause death, like say a dislocated shoulder, then Andy's ability isn't just nerfed, but it outright doesn't even bother to try and activate because, well, he's not negating the universal concept of chiropractors now, is he? And while this little quirk of negator abilities does sort of seem like a pretty crappy weakness to have, its level of usefulness does actually go both ways, since like we saw during Andy's fight with Rip, who has the negator ability Unrepair, Andy was initially perfectly capable of healing against him just fine, since Unrepair specifically negated the law or rule of repairing or fixing something, making any kind of damage irreparable, but in Andy's mind he was only undoing his own death, making a new body, as opposed to repairing an old one. But once the power of Unrepair was actually explained to Andy and his lack of understanding was cleared up, he suddenly lost the ability to heal his limbs because the repeated forced removal of Andy's body parts to regrow them began to be seen as a form of repairing himself, at least in the mind of Andy. So when up against other negator powers with their own strict rules, or even other shonen power systems that have clearly defined mechanics, everything from Andy's knowledge of how those opposing abilities function to what kind of damage he even takes completely determines what sort of healing he will experience. And even within the confines of his own series, like I just pointed out, Andy has made good use of said rules to properly manipulate his body in fights, not just defensively like he did against Rip, but also offensively, doing things, for example, such as removing his fingertips to launch his blood-fueled projectiles, or removing his legs to begin flying with the same high blood pressure jets, or even straight up just doing his own Kamehameha knockoff made of blood waves. All of these things only work because bleeding will directly cause a normal person to lose their life. meaning undead triggers to continuously replenish and refuel blood supplies for Andy to continue his weird regeneration attacking methods. But let's go ahead and just stomp the brakes hard on this one, because hopefully we all know and are fully aware that as cool as Andy and his powers are, he, on his own, has absolutely no chance of beating a serious Goku in a one-on-one fight. While Andy has his very human level finger guns and unbreakable katana as his primary methods of fighting, with, you know, generally respectable feats of city destroying power and pretty massive speed, Goku is just straight up capable of shattering the whole universe with his bare hands and moving within frozen time just cause he's him, without ever even bothering to get one of his many new hairdos on. Even though Andy is perfectly respectable in terms of power against most shonen protags, the sort of numbers he's putting up aren't even going to get him past OG Dragon Ball, with King Piccolo just lifting up one hand, and this being the same King Piccolo that Goku punched straight through as a literal child, implying that even Kid Goku could probably just break Andy's neck to bare minimum make this fight a draw. So let's be under no delusion of Andy's chance in a 1v1 against someone whose literal chest muscles have broken the hands of gods trying to punch him. Instead, let's focus on the real question you clicked for: could Goku actually put down the undead negator himself when nothing else in his own series was feasibly capable of it, even despite Andy actively seeking out his own death to bookend this very long and storied history of his? And the answer to this question should probably start with where Andy's limits actually lie, since, as any Dragon Ball fan would know, Goku has already beaten more than a few characters with souped up levels of regen in the past. Which is a perfect baseline to start with, since, yeah, the same sort of attacks that destroyed Super Perfect Cell, who could regenerate from a single cell, or Kid Buu, who could regenerate from even less than that, would 100% destroy Andy's body well beyond its natural healing limit that we see constantly within the series. From meteor showers to the vacuum of space and even being laser blasted, all these things pushed Andy's body to the point where it couldn't heal fast enough and had to instead slow down, then try to make up for the healing afterwards. So is this case closed then? Could even Kid Goku just Kamehameha Andy out of existence and call it a day? Well, no, not exactly. Since, while yes, Andy's undead has shown a sort of pseudo-limit to how fast or how much he can heal from at one given time, we know that Andy's regeneration, as well as all negator powers, fundamentally stem from the soul, meaning that unlike Cell or Buu, who once completely destroyed would have nothing to regenerate back from using their biological regen, Andy can come back from nothingness, since his power is not healing, but as I told you before, literally negating the effects of death as a concept via his soul. And even though Goku could absolutely vaporize him without any difficulty or just like chuck him into space, Andy would still be thoroughly alive if only a bit incapacitated. So, does this mean Andy could genuinely survive an encounter with the Saiyan from Earth? Since, while Goku is known for many things, having a complex moveset or hacks isn't really among those traits. For about 99% of the series' runtime, in fact, all he really knows how to do is punch and shoot laser beams, like we all know and love. And for your answer, it all basically comes down to one factor, since in effect, there are really only two ways to permanently remove the Un from Andy's title, being concept manipulation and complete destruction of the soul. Meaning basically that unless you're a divine being, another negator, or some oddball case who can somehow nullify the concept of Andy's undead reversal, your only conventional ticket to finishing Andy, no matter who you are, all comes down to one factor. Can you completely obliterate Andy's soul? For some characters, like a Naruto or Ichigo with soul-based attacks, this would be a walk in the park. But for others who are more conventionally strong, like Luffy or Gojo, there might literally be no way to end the life of this new-gen menace. But in the case of Goku in particular, even as the god he is, which of those two groups he would actually fall in almost completely depends on continuity, since unlike most anime, Goku's story is currently under the rule of not one, not two, but three separate distinct canon storylines, being the movie timeline, the manga timeline, and finally, the anime timeline. And to cut to the chase, in the movie timeline, which features all Toriyama's original movies from Battle of God to Superhero, Goku's genuinely got nothing. Sure, he could literally punch Andy into another dimension, but in terms of ending his life for good, this version of Goku, and by proxy any version of Z and before, just don't have any way to damage the soul. For the anime-only timeline, on the other hand, featuring Dragon Ball Super, Goku is in a slightly awkward position since in this continuity he does actually fight the immortal Zamasu and even comes up with a way to beat him, but the method he learned, the Mafuba, is only a sealing technique and one that needs the outside help of a rice cooker at that. So despite literally having universe-shattering power, this would still end up another tie with the Andy Man, leaving only one final saving grace for Goku. A singular timeline for the fans of the fiction soloing king to hold on to hope with, and in this iteration of specifically the Dragon Ball Super manga, Goku does in fact finally have a way to put an end to the undead negator for good, being the Hakai. In case you never read the Super manga though, this is basically a second take on what Dragon Ball Super could have been if it was written by another author. And within this version, Goku sees the ultimate technique of the God of Destruction, Lord Beerus, then decides he'll just copy it to his repertoire for later to use against the immortal Zamasu. The Hakai is a very special technique though, due to its stated ability of being able to completely erase anything it touches from existence, be it matter, ki, or even, you guessed it, souls, as it's explained that once a person is erased with this move, they simply cease to exist, as well as it being shown to work on an actual ghost during a filler arc in the anime. And although Beerus does say this technique won't work on an immortal, Andy is not actually immortal, but instead just a regular person who has the ability to Uno reverse card death. But since his negator powers do still directly stem from his own soul, like all others, one blast from this very specific Goku's hand, only in the manga continuity of DBS, would spell the end for Andy. But if you liked this video, before you go, I've got a very special announcement for you. Whether this is your first video with us or you are one of the OGs, in just 4 short months, you've helped us to rack up an unbelievable count of 600 subscribers. A dream come true wouldn't begin to describe how glad I am to be making content today for all of you. But because I know that no amount of words could really express my gratitude for you hitting that big red button, the team and I have decided to pay you back the best way we know how, with the month of Almighty. For the entire month of December, we're doing double the content and triple the hype to make a mad dash for that fabled goal of 1,000 subscribers before the turn of the new year. And just so you know that we aren't pulling any punches, our next video might just also be featuring Goku against someone even more unbreakable. If you're all with me for the long haul now, hit that subscribe button down below, and that's all for today. Thanks, everyone.